Kaylee Turner, after reviewing testimony, physical evidence, and your own recorded statements, the court finds you responsible for the violent death of your grandmother. The seriousness of your actions leaves no alternative. You will serve life in state custody.
Life? You're joking. I'll be out when I'm older.
On October 12, 2023, police in Bristol County, Massachusetts, received a 911 call from a trembling voice, a neighbor, reporting screams coming from a small suburban home on Maplewood Drive when officers arrived. They found the front door slightly open, the living room in disarray, and a motionless elderly woman lying on the kitchen floor. Paramedics pronounced her dead at the scene. The victim was later identified as Linda Reynolds, a 68-year-old retired teacher known for raising her granddaughter since the child's mother had passed away years earlier. The granddaughter, just 11 years old, was nowhere to be found. Officers immediately launched a neighborhood search. Within 45 minutes, they located the young girl barefoot and shaking. Walking along a nearby trail, her clothes were stained with blood. When asked what happened, she reportedly whispered, "I didn't mean to do it." That one sentence set off a case that stunned the entire country and 1 year old now at the center of a murder investigation. Investigators quickly secured the home. What they found was both disturbing and confusing. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing was stolen. The struggle appeared to have taken place entirely in the kitchen. A bloodied kitchen knife was found near the sink. Fingerprints confirmed it had been held by both the victim and the child. A toppled chair and broken glass suggested a sudden outburst, not a planned attack. Detectives pieced together that whatever had happened had escalated quickly and violently. Neighbors told police that Linda was a devoted grandmother who took full custody of her granddaughter after the girl's mother died of an overdose 3 years earlier. She loved that child more than anything. One neighbor said, "You'd always see them walking to school together." But behind the closed doors of that quiet home, there were growing problems. Teachers at the girls' school described her as withdrawn, angry, and often disruptive. The school counselor had even filed a behavioral report, noting that the child had spoken about arguments at home. According to early statements, the confrontation began the night before the killing. The grandmother had taken away the girl's tablet and restricted her from using the internet after discovering inappropriate messages with an older teenager. That decision reportedly triggered a violent reaction. In her initial interview, the girl told police, "She yelled at me, and I just wanted her to stop." What followed was an act that no one could comprehend, an outburst that ended in tragedy. By the next morning, crime scene investigators, psychologists, and child welfare officers flooded the small Bristol home. The child was taken into custody, but because of her age, she was first placed in a secure juvenile facility rather than a police cell. The case immediately made national headlines. The media labeled her the youngest killer in Massachusetts. Reporters and protesters gathered outside the courthouse demanding answers. How could an 1-year-old be capable of murder? And if she was, should she be treated like an adult? The district attorney announced that despite her age, the evidence suggested intent and understanding. A special juvenile hearing was scheduled to determine whether she could be tried as an adult, a move that shocked the public. Her defense team argued that the child suffered from trauma, emotional neglect, and possible mental health disorders, making her incapable of forming intent. But the state's forensic evaluation told another story. According to the report, she was fully aware of her actions during the attack and even tried to hide the knife afterward. In that moment, this wasn't just a tragedy. It became a legal and moral battlefield. Could a child who had just turned 11 truly understand life, death, and consequence? The answer would determine whether she faced therapy or a life sentence. The morning after the arrest, detectives began reconstructing the final hours before Linda Reynolds' death. Surveillance cameras from nearby homes captured the grandmother and child returning from a grocery store at 4:17 p.m. the previous day. Nothing seemed unusual. They walked side by side, the girl clutching a bag of snacks. But according to investigators, the real escalation began later that night. Phone records revealed that at 8:46 p.m., Linda discovered explicit text messages on her granddaughter's hidden messaging app. Private conversations between the girl and a 16-year-old boy she had met online. According to prosecutors, Linda immediately confiscated her tablet and phone. Telling her that all social media privileges were suspended indefinitely, the girl reacted with uncontrollable rage. Neighbors later reported hearing shouting and something heavy slamming against a wall around 9:10 p.m. No one called police. They assumed it was a normal family argument they would regret that silence for the rest of their lives. Detectives learned from the medical examiner that Linda suffered 6 stab wounds, 3 of them fatal. The angle of the strikes suggested a smaller attacker. Investigators also noted defensive cuts on Linda's hands, meaning she fought back. The most heartbreaking discovery was that after the attack, Linda likely survived for nearly 2 minutes, long enough to try reaching the phone on the counter. Blood smear marks confirmed she made it halfway across the kitchen before collapsing. When questioned, the 11-year-old initially told police that someone came into the house, but her story changed repeatedly. Forensic testing revealed her fingerprints on the knife handle, blood on her shirt, and trace cuts on her palms consistent with someone gripping a sharp object forcefully. During the second interview conducted with child psychology specialists, she reportedly said, "I just wanted her to stop yelling," then whispered, "I didn't think she would die." Prosecutors would later argue that this statement proved she understood the lethal risk of her actions. Meanwhile, investigators analyzed the child's online messages. They discovered that the 6-year-old boy she was speaking to had encouraged her to run away if her grandmother tried to control her internet access. Though the boy denied knowing about the crime, prosecutors stated the messages may have fueled the girl's emotional spiral. Child Services confirmed that Linda had been trying to restrict the online relationship, fearing the older boy was grooming her. Authorities never found evidence that he knew of the attack beforehand, but the conversation history revealed the girl frequently threatened self-harm and violence when angry. The prosecution's theory was clear. The girl lashed out when her grandmother tried to protect her. The defense, however, countered aggressively. They argued the girl suffered from multiple untreated mental health disorders, including possible trauma from her mother's death. Her school files contain notes documenting explosive behavior and episodes of emotional detachment. A previous report stated she once stabbed a classroom wall with a pencil during an argument. According to her therapist, she exhibited signs of early sociopathic behavior, including a lack of empathy and a history of lying. Still, the biggest question remained: should an 11-year-old be tried as an adult? The courtroom filled beyond capacity for the juvenile transfer hearing on November 17, 2023. Reporters, activists, and grieving family members crowded together as the prosecutor detailed the brutality of the attack. He argued that the child demonstrated planning, removing the knife from the kitchen block, striking repeatedly, and attempting to hide. He concluded this was not an accident. This was intent. The defense responded that no child of 11 could fully understand permanent consequences. They insisted she was emotionally shattered by the loss of her mother and lacked the psychological maturity to form intent. They also emphasized that Linda was not only her guardian, but her only remaining immediate family, arguing that killing her could not have been premeditated because she had nowhere to go afterward. One moment stunned the courtroom. When asked why she attacked her grandmother, the girl reportedly said, almost emotionlessly, "She kept taking things from me." The audience gasped. Some began to cry. Prosecutors claimed this flat tone demonstrated emotional detachment bordering on psychopathy. The defense argued it showed shock and dissociation. The judge ordered a full psychological evaluation. Over 6 weeks, forensic experts interviewed the girl, reviewed her history, and tested her cognitive development. Their final report was controversial. It concluded that despite her age, she had the mental awareness to understand life, death, and criminal consequences. According to the evaluator, she possessed reasoning equivalent to an adolescent several years older. Public outrage exploded. The protests formed outside the courthouse, some demanding justice for Linda, others begging mercy for the child. News outlets called it one of the most disturbing juvenile cases in recent U.S. history. With mounting pressure, the judge deliberated for 10 days before delivering the decision. The girl would stand trial as an adult for first-degree murder. Gasps echoed across the courtroom. The child's face reportedly remained blank, staring straight ahead. As the trial date approached, prosecutors prepared to show the nation how an 11-year-old's anger turned lethal. The defense prepared to argue that the grandmother failed the child emotionally. Families were torn, The town was shaken, and the country waited to see whether a child would face the most severe penalty the state could impose. The trial began on March 4, 2024, and media outlets from across the country packed the courthouse. Security was increased after crowds gathered outside, holding signs that read, "Justice for Linda," and "She's only a child." Inside, the one-year-old defendant sat at the defense table wearing a loose-fitting tan uniform. Her feet barely touched the floor. She stared forward, expressionless. Prosecutors opened with a blunt statement. This is not about age. It's about intention. They described the killing as deliberate and vicious. 6 targeted stabbing injuries, 3 fatal, and no attempt to call for help. Photos of the kitchen were shown: overturned chair, bloody floor, the knife on the ground where she dropped it. Jurors grimaced. Some turned away. The victim's sister wept silently. The prosecution's first witness was the responding officer. He testified that the girl met them at the door and calmly said, "My grandma won't wake up." His body cam footage shown in court captured her standing still while paramedics tried desperately to revive Linda. The room fell silent as the video played, her small voice detached, asking. On the third day, a neighbor took the stand. She testified she saw the girl earlier that evening arguing with her grandmother on the front porch. She heard Linda say, "I'm trying to help you." And the girl responded, "I don't need you." The witness described the girl's tone as cold, like someone much older. But the most disturbing testimony came from the forensic psychologist who conducted the state-ordered evaluation. He concluded the child had an emotional age older than 11, describing her as highly intelligent, highly reactive, and capable of calculated behavior. He stated that she understood that stabbing could kill someone, and admitted she told him she felt nothing when her grandmother fell to the floor. The jury was stunned. The girl watched him quietly without reaction. During cross-examination, the defense attempted to paint the expert's conclusions as speculative, but the damage was done. Reporters later called his testimony the moment the trial changed. The courtroom atmosphere grew more tense when the judge allowed the girl's interrogation confession to be played in full. "In it," she said softly, "she kept yelling, 'I wanted her to stop. I didn't think it would be this big.'" The prosecutor paused the audio and asked the jury to consider what she meant by this big. He suggested she understood. She had caused death, but underestimated the legal consequences, not the moral gravity. Her behavior in court fueled controversy. Some days she sat still, blank. Other days, she appeared annoyed, rolling her eyes when evidence was repeated, whispering to her attorney, or sighing as if the process bored her. The victim's friends saw these reactions as disrespectful, fueling online debates. Social media exploded, split between those calling her a child killer and others claiming she was failed by the system. The defense strategy intensified. They argued Linda might have unintentionally provoked the attack by yelling or grabbing the girl during the argument, triggering a panic response. Prosecutors countered with medical reports showing stab wounds delivered with force and precision, not wild panic. They accused the defense of blaming the victim. Finally, both sides rested after 10 days. Tensions ran high as the courtroom prepared for closing arguments. The prosecution reminded jurors of the brutality, the statements, the psychology reports, and the cold courtroom behavior. He finished with, "She knew what death was. She chose it for her grandmother." The defense closed by stressing her age, only 11. They compared her brain development to that of a child who could barely comprehend consequences. Justice, her attorney said, must reflect humanity. The jury received instructions. The judge reminded them age alone could not acquit, but intention must be proven beyond reasonable doubt. After 9 hours of deliberation, a note was sent from the jury room. The jury returned after 8 hours at 4:37 p.m. They found the 1-year-old girl guilty of first-degree murder. She showed no emotion. Her father lowered his head. The victim's family remained silent. Prosecutors requested the maximum sentence, life imprisonment with parole eligibility after decades. Defense argued trauma, age, and lack of proper supervision. The judge asked if she wanted to speak. She said quietly, "I didn't mean for all this. It just happened." No apology, no breakdown. The judge issued sentencing. Life imprisonment, parole after 25 years. Deputies cuffed her. The restraints were too large and had to be tightened. She looked at the floor the entire time and did not look at her family while being escorted out. Public reaction split immediately. Some demanded she never be freed. Others claimed she was a product of neglect, deserved psychological help. News outlets and social media pushed the case to national attention. Experts debated whether an 1-year-old could truly grasp the nature of her actions or if the crime reflected deeper environmental failures. She was transferred to a secure juvenile facility. Staff described her as quiet, distant, and emotionally flat. No violent behavior. No crying. She spent time reading and drawing, rarely speaking to others. Therapists said she acknowledged what she did but showed little emotional understanding. They reported high intelligence, low empathy, and an unusual calmness about her situation. She will remain in juvenile custody until adulthood, then be moved to an adult prison. Earliest parole is after 25 years. Reviews will continue every 7 years if denied. There will be no early release before the minimum term. Final outcome. Grandmother dead. Child imprisoned for life. 2 families permanently damaged. The case remains one of the youngest life sentence convictions ever recorded, continuing to raise questions about children, responsibility, and justice.